come to it for the right reasons, for an understanding that A is A and reality exists and man is what he is, and because of the nature of man, it is wrong to violate man's life and property. And not only that, but really a whole set of ancillary beliefs that Rand attached to it. She thought you were just as bad as all of the rest, and so she, while clearly and obviously politically a libertarian, she never felt comfortable with the larger libertarian movement.
Yet she influenced many libertarians.
Oh, unquestionably, yeah. The reason why Rand has to be central to the book, despite all that, is it's getting less true as time goes on, but there's a reason why that comedic history of libertarianism I mentioned earlier was called It Usually Begins with Ayn Rand, because it did. Ayn Rand really was, if you came into libertarianism any time from the 40s through the 80s, it's almost certain that Ayn Rand had a great deal to do with it. She was a powerful influence. Her novels, hated by some, hated by many, loved by me, are a particularly emotionally powerful way to help you understand the bad things that can happen in an overly governed world. I mean, that's pretty much the main theme of Atlas Shrugged, is this very vivid vision of the ultimate bad end of overweening unlibertarian government. And that kind of vision can spark something in a human heart, perhaps a little bit stronger than a 1,000-page economics text such as Mises' Human Action, as great a book as that is, and as inspirational as that can be as well. So Rand, despite her eccentricities and despite her self-identified loathing of libertarianism, was a great libertarian figure and a overpoweringly important libertarian influence.
Well, we're moving towards the end of the program. What do you think of the state of libertarianism today? These ideas have been important for many years. There have been a huge number of figures. There's some political impact, at least. How do you assess it?
There is strong reason for both optimism and pessimism. And something I've realized while contemplating the shape of the movement's history throughout my book is that optimism and pessimism, strangely enough, are the two great enemies of the libertarian activist. Short-term optimism is an enemy because if you believe that we must and we will and we have to have liberty now because the economic collapse that the hard money people warned us about is about to happen, or it's just the morality of locking up one more person just because they decided to smoke marijuana, denying one more person the right to get married because they're gay, the one more person killed in Iraq is so morally wrong and has to stop now. If you become fixated on that and then realize that it ain't going to happen overnight, it burns you out, you lose interest. Long-term pessimism is also a mistake because there's so many ways in which we're living in a much more libertarian world than we were in the 40s. Within the movement, it's true that there's so many more opportunities to be a professional libertarian than there were back then. Wage and price controls that Nixon instituted, I don't think we can imagine something like that happening again. The stagflation we saw in the 70s, hopefully we'll not see it like again. A lot of this ties in with Friedman. The draft, we don't have the draft anymore. Some of the things that were illegal to do as late as the 70s, there were caps on loan rates. In many states, you couldn't rent a hotel room with someone who you weren't married to. Women's rights, gay rights, civil rights. A lot of these things have improved immensely, and I think there absolutely is a lot of reason for hope. The dream of socialism, which dominated the world from the 40s almost till the time the Berlin Wall fell, pretty much dead. There are a lot of large-scale reasons for optimism. Of course, there are also a lot of large-scale reasons for pessimism. It's true, especially in the American context, which my book focuses on, that the American government does still continue to tax more and regulate more and investigate secretly more, than it had at least 20 years ago. However, historical perspective is also important. If you look at the World War I context and the things that Wilson was able to get away with against the people who opposed his war, versus what Bush is able to get away with against the people who oppose his war. It's a little bit historically blind to complain that George W. Bush is the worst tyrant the world has ever known. It's simply not the case, though. He is certainly terrible in many ways and very unlibertarian. So, to sum up, it's a constant fight. I mean, it goes back to the classical liberal European forebears, Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill. There's a long fight for people's right to live their life the way they want to live. Libertarians understand it's pretty much an endless fight, that power is always going to want to take more, and that liberty is always going to have to fighting against power. And I think there's certainly many reasons for libertarians to feel that the work they've done has been important in furthering the day that comes. Leonard Read, the founder of FEE, his mission was specifically the education of the single mind. He didn't talk about affecting political change. He talked about, the word education was in the name of his organization, Foundation for Economic Education. It was about educating mind to mind, and at the point when enough people understand the principles of free markets and liberty, understand that the minimum wage is probably going to lock people out of jobs, understand that the drug war creates more problems than it solves, understands that the benefits that an American business gets from a tariff are overwhelmed by the losses to American consumers from a tariff. As long as people start understanding these things about liberty, when enough people understand it, then we're going to live in a libertarian world. That the politicians and the big institutions are going to be lagging indicators, not leading indicators. So the libertarian mission of education and libertarian principles has to continue. It's slow. It's going to take a long time. There's no quick fix solution. There's no philosopher king you're going to stick in. So ultimately, I would say that the message in contemplating the whole history of the movement in my book is mostly optimistic, while remembering it shouldn't be short-term optimistic, because that's it's going to burn you out.
Well, what institutions, what people today strike you as the most important repositories of this mission, who are probably going to be leading the libertarian movement in a broad sense in the coming years?
I will, of course, speak for the institution that employs me, Reason Magazine. It's the largest circulation political magazine that approaches politics from a libertarian perspective. We do great work every month. Here in D.C., the Cato Institute has been an enormous success story. It's grown from nothing to a $22 million a year operation, a very full-service policy house with sticking libertarian ideas into the debate about any policy issue you care to name. An amazing and inspirational victory for libertarianism in the mass media has been the success of John Stossel at ABC, one of the few explicitly hardcore libertarian people within the so-called mainstream media. It's the kind of thing that probably even 15 years ago, if you had told a libertarian that someone like him with his beliefs would have his position, they go, oh, it's crazy, it's never going to happen. He's great. A newer organization called the Institute for Justice is fabulous, and I found in my archival work that libertarians had been praying and talking about a group like this all the way back into the 40s, this notion of a sort of libertarian ACLU, in essence, a group that actually fights legal battles for libertarian principles. The Institute for Justice, it's only been around less than 2 decades, and it's already fought 3 cases in the Supreme Court and won 2 of them, and it's fighting for the sort of economic liberties that the ACLU does not fight for. Absolutely inspirational and vitally important. The most important thing, though, to bring it back to the Leonard Read idea, is not necessarily any of these big institutions, but how many individuals out there who actually understand and believe in libertarian ideas. And I mentioned this is an extremely rough metric, but I think the notion of the 13 million people who cast votes for Libertarian Party candidates is very, very positive. And back in the 40s, these libertarian leaders would have been amazed if they knew there was 2,000 people who believed what they believed, and now there are literally millions, and that's the real victory of the movement.
I think on that note, we're going to have to end. Thank you, Brian. It's been a great discussion. Radicals for Capitalism, Brian Doherty.
It's wonderful to be here, Doug. Thank you very much.
history, biography, and public affairs.